Hey guys, well, at least here in Maryland, we just got our first little snowstorm, and to say none of the least, it seems like already, I kind of got the cabin fever already. It might have just been because of COVID being keeping us at home a lot more already, but yeah, it doesn't feel like the same excitement that I typically get when I have a snowstorm because normally I'm looking forward to it, but already here I am thinking, I want to get out and do some fishing, but with snow, things tend to get a little bit more limited. I won't say it's impossible, but there are definitely options out there. With that being said, when it comes cold weather, one of the first species that I think of is actually trout. I know that I was actually planning to do this for the fall season, but definitely now is the time to start thinking about the spring trout season here in Maryland. And as most people know, at least in the central part of Maryland, a lot of the trout fishing is stock trout and falls in place with a lot of like the sales that Bass Pros or Dick's or Cabela's all has with that season. So my recommendation usually is to plan ahead, and then when those sales come around, to take advantage of them to stock up on whatever you need. Trout stocking, for those of you that don't know, DNR actually posts their full stocking schedule, and they'll actually tell you the quantities and generally what type of trout they'll be stocking in what areas. There's actually a pre-stocking that's not going to be as specified. They just tell you quantities, and they don't really give you the exact dates, so to speak. But there will be seasonal stocking that falls right after the preseason, and obviously they'll be more precise on where it's stocked and obviously the quantities as well. Obviously, with these stock areas, it's gonna be pretty packed, and they get fished out pretty quick. I'll say. So when they say early bird catches the worm, that's actually a very true statement. So once you guys hear that it's stocked, try to get out there early in the morning and try to fish before all the fish get spooked, and and take advantage of the fishing then. If you can't, I still recommend getting out there because um, you can still catch fish. I mean, I've showed up very late in the day or very late in the week and still managed to catch near limits or even just limits in at times as well. So I would definitely recommend you getting out there even if it is too late. And another point I would like to make is that with the stocking going on, Maryland specifically anyway, it's a great opportunity to introduce new kids or new people to fishing, because generally these fish are a little easier to catch, I might say. So because they're so congregated or they're so schooled up. So it's a great opportunity to get someone into fishing. I know that a lot of us that like to fish, do just like to get out there and go, and we're happy just to be out there. But when it comes to a person that's kind of hesitant about fishing or not even really interested, but they're just going just for the heck of it, if you'd like to them into it, especially kids, um, pre-scout and pre-fish spots before you go, before you take them. That's something that I've learned, and that's what I do with my son as well. Especially little kids. I mean, they're not gonna sit around and wait for you to find the fish or whatever, and they're gonna be bored and they're gonna want to go home. So, if you're trying to get a friend or especially little kids into it, pre-fish, pre-scout spots and take them out there, and that might be part of you going out fishing for a day for yourself or even for 30 minutes and seeing what people are doing and what they're catching it on, because the trend usually lasts for a while, especially with stock trout. So I also want to take the opportunity for those beginners that might not know what they want, or what they need to get in order to get started. I just wanted to give you a quick tutorial on the very basic gear that I would need to take to go trout fishing. And to be honest, this is probably just about all the tackle I would need to go on a basic trout fishing trip. To be honest, it might be filled with slightly different things, but based on where I'm going, whether it be a lake or a creek or a stream. But really, this is probably just about all I need to take. So don't think that you need a whole big backpack full of different gear. General setup that I have, it's gonna be a light or ultralight rod. I actually prefer the ultralight rods. I'll start off with the most basic setup that a lot of people have and kind of joke about, but I feel like it's a great starter rod, and I even still use it just as a beat up and just get out there rod. But it's the obvious ugly stick, right? Ugly stick, ultralight. Actually, this is actually a light action rod, but you could get the ultralight as well. 4 to 10 pound line rating, and really, yeah, this is it. It comes with the rod, the reel, and this setup I believe is like $30, so brand new, and you could probably get it used for a lot cheaper because these last forever. The other rod I have, if you guys want to get some things with a little bit more of a name or whatever, is actually the rod is actually still, I don't know what brand this is. This is it says Inferno, but Field and Stream rod. It's an ultralight rod. I mean, heck, this one even has like a broken tip. I broke it when I was fishing a stream at one point, but so it's a little stiffer than what I typically use for. But it's an ultralight rod with a line rating of 2 to 6 pound test, and that's really about all you need, really. This was just a rod when I got it, so this is, if you guys want to get a name brand reel that's not too expensive, Shimano brand is well known and it's really good. I really recommend these Sienna reels. And a lot of times during these sales, these Siennas go for really cheap, to be honest. And I'm not gonna say they're awesome reels, but for the price and for just the basic, trout, simple trips like around here or getting started fishing, these are phenomenal reels. I would say that they work out very good. I mean, there are some features obviously it's lacking in, but like I said, as a starter reel, just to get out there and just fish, this will. Well, the drag is great. The styling is great. I mean, it's smooth. There's nothing more that you could really ask for in a cheap reel. So Shimano Siennas are probably one of the best starter reels I would recommend getting. But that's basically the rod. Normally, typically, I have, when it comes down to lures, I'm typically using 2 pounds or 2 pounds or 4 pound test lines. And it's mainly just get the castability, because lures are not as heavy as like a sinker and weight would be for when you're throwing power bait or just trout bait. When I'm fishing with power bait, I actually don't mind going up to even 6 pound test, to be honest. And I'll show you the reason why. But yeah, that's kind of the basic setup that I have. So as far as rigs go, I'll start with the lures, just because I'm not going to show you how to tie or whatever, because that's pretty basic information. But the two most common lures that I use is actually going to be the trout magnet, and I'll usually have a variety of colors, and the rooster tails, or some people use net spinners and so forth. But I've personally just always use the rooster tails, so that's what I like, and they actually go on sale for pretty good prices during those spring sales that I mentioned. So another great opportunity to get some decent spinners, inline spinners. And when it comes down to spinners, just like what I mentioned for the trout magnet, have a variety of colors and also blade colors. People don't realize the blade color actually makes a big difference in how fish might react, to be honest. And this goes for trout, smallies, whatever. I mean, rooster tails catches like anything, really. But having a variety of the color of the actual the feather or the fur, and also the blade color, makes a huge difference in trying to key in on what they're biting. So I would say definitely get a variety of colors and also weights also, because different weights obviously sink, at different rates, and also you're able to work it a little differently. So different weights, different colors, and also different blade colors. I would say just start with a few varieties, and you'll be able to figure out what you like best. Next is actually the rigs. So one of the reasons why I said that, at least on one or two of the rods that I have, I like to have at least about 6 pound test line, is because of this. So one of the rigs that I like to use is the Carolina rig, or fish finder rig, or whatever you like to call it. But it's pretty much an egg sinker, or for you bass fishermen, you could even use your the worm weights. I like to have the 6 pound test line because since it is rubbing on the line, I feel like, I mean, just for my own sake, I just don't want it to wear out the line too much. So have it going a little bit thicker, I feel like it gives me a little bit more self confidence. And then what that goes in, and this is about a 1/4 ounce sinker, and that I don't really go above a 1/4 ounce, to be honest. If anything, I'll go lighter if I can, based on the conditions. But usually in the winter, there's a little bit of a breeze or wind. So, and I like to try to keep the line as tight as possible. So a 1/4 ounce seems to be the general weight that I use most often. But anyhow, 1/4 ounce egg sinker. And then I put it to a barrel swivel here. And then this is pretty critical. The lines leading up to the fish hook, the actual hook itself, I always use fluorocarbon. And trout is probably one of the most specific species that I always use fluorocarbon, because they're very line shy, they're very finicky, it's very overfished, like I mentioned. Just a lot of fishermen usually when they're stock trout. So whatever you could do to conceal the line or the hook, or make it look a little bit, at least a little bit more natural, the better. So fluorocarbon is highly recommended, especially with the leader going up to the hook itself. I fished next to my friend when he swore that mono was fine or whatever. He wasn't catching, I was catching, and that's always been the case. And finally, he was convinced to actually start using fluoro. So always use fluoro. And when it comes down to the leader, I typically don't go higher than the 2 or the 4 pound fluoro. I like to keep it very light. One reason is that power bait, it's meant to float, so you don't want to weigh it down with anything really. And I know that people are saying, "Oh, it's such a light line," but whatever weight you could cut, the better, and the more natural it could kind of float around. Too thick of a line will kind of give it a very stiff look, and it's not going to float naturally. And another thing is, I don't go bigger than a size 10 hook. I know here I use this Eagle Claw here bait holder, but to be honest, I actually like or prefer the size 10, the salmon egg hook, much better. Color doesn't really matter, it's gonna be covered up anyways, but I just usually get the gold. I don't know why, I just like it better. So now that I'm on this rod here, I'll actually show you this is the other option that I go with. And another reason why I prefer the 6 pound test when I'm fishing with power bait. So this is I just do the typical high-low, well, not really a high-low, but just a single dropper loop with the fluorocarbon leader going to my hook. Obviously with the bank sinker on the bottom. So the reason why I actually use this, or actually use a combination of the 2 rigs, is that this one's going to sit a little higher off the ground. I know that you could I guess give it a longer leader on the other one, but sometimes they're very finicky in biting the bait. But with this being floating like this, right? And they bite it. Since this is attached directly to the line itself, I feel like sometimes on this rig, I'm able to bite the finicky, feel or catch the finicky bites a little bit easier than the other one. I know that the sliding rig does allow you to notice the small things, but I don't know. Just maybe it's just me, but I feel like having it attached directly to the main line itself, I'm able to catch the small little differences a little bit more easily. And then you will see in the video of my setup once I do fish these rods. Me personally, once again, I like to actually have my rod as horizontal as possible. Once again, because I don't usually look at the rod tip for my bite. As you'll see in my video, I actually like to use a bobber on my line here, hanging, to sense the bites. So any movement in the bobber here, I'm gonna know that there's something going on with my bait. Two reasons why I like that. One, the fish won't feel the tension on my rod in any way. And two, when it's windy, typically when it's windy, since you're using your ultralight rods, it's gonna be moving, and sometimes the movements is hard to detect whether it's gonna be a bite or not. But when you have a bobber, it will kind of rock and move around a little bit. But when there's some kind of bite, since there is that weight to the bobber, usually the wind's not going to pick that bobber up any significant amount. So any kind of movement in that bobber is going to tell me that it's something a little bit more than the wind. So and you'll definitely see it in the video that I'll put on to the end of this. So that's the reason why I like to have it horizontal. I mean, I guess when I don't have the two stakes, I mean, yeah, you could just put it vertical, like down here. I never put it down on the bottom here, because one thing I noticed is that with the weight coming down, when you go to set the hook and let's just say the bobber's not all the way up, you get tangled in your reel and all that stuff, and you end up losing fish, snapping your line, doing whatever. So if you are going to have it vertical, or actually on a diagonal, I'd say at least go between at least two guides. And you'll notice that I even do that even with, or try to do that with when my rod's horizontal as well. So always try to stay between a guide so that the bobber's staying away from your reel. But that's just going to be another word of advice. But to each their own. So I'm not going to tell you have to do it, but that's just what has worked for me. And prior to the fishing, two things that you always want to check is there's nothing more frustrating than not catching fish. Is actually hooking a fish and losing it, right? Because at least you had the opportunity to catch it, but you didn't. And no one believes you when you say you almost caught a fish. So first thing is dealing with the thinner line. Always double check your knot strength. When you tie it, give it a good pull, tug. Make sure your knots are good and they're not going to come apart. Secondly, whenever you tie into a main line, never tie a knot directly into your main line. I know that some people kind of do the overhand knots right onto their main, and they wrap it all around and do another knot just to kind of keep it in place. That will not be strong enough to maintain you constantly setting hooks on a fish and whatever, and that will break on you. So I typically use, once again, the dropper loop, and I just go to a loop-to-loop connection pretty much. So that's what I like to do. Or if you guys are really uncertain about that, use a three-way swivel, I guess. That's could probably be better than you tying into the main line itself. Secondly, always set the drag. Drag is very critical when it comes to trout fishing, especially because of light lines. I think the math is at least 1/3 of the pound test, and I know it gets pretty tricky, but I like to, as you can tell, I like to keep it very loose when I'm fishing. But you don't want it too loose to the point where the bail's spinning on you when you set the hook. So always set your drag before you start fishing every time you go, because you never know what happens with your drag. So just another thing. I mean, I made a very sloppy knot right here, but I'll show you why you don't want this. When you tie knots, you want to be able to trim any kind of tag end possible. I will tell you, trout, once again, they're very finicky. So if they feel something awkward, they will spit the hook. So trim whatever tag ends you can. Make sure the knots are good, and yeah, just have a clean setup, and then you should be able to get on the fish. Just get out there. I mean, that's the biggest thing. That's my biggest reason for me trying to share my advice and to let you know what you need to get started. I'm not trying to make anyone a pro by any means. I'm not saying I'm the best fisherman by any means, but I realize that trying to get into something it's very hard to try to find information that's correct because you have so much information out there, especially with the internet. But I just wanted you to be able to just pick up a few items, learn a few rigs, and just get out there. And if you guys want me to get into details with the knots that I use or whatever else, um, just drop a comment, and I'll go through the basics through all that as well. I want to do the work to make your life easier. So that's just the main reason why I do this, and that's why I enjoy doing this. So when you get out there, it's pretty obvious who's catching fish and who's not. And especially with Trout again, they're very schooled up. So never do you want to go right up next to them and start casting over the lines and take their spot. You never want to do that. But usually, I will tell you this: that usually when they're catching there, and the park or the pond or the stream was just stocked, they will probably be there for at least a few days. To be honest, I mean, in typically people might think that once they drop the fish in the lake, they're going to scatter to every part of the lake, but that is not the case. They stay schooled up. They swim in general areas. So if you see someone catching fish somewhere, typically there's going to be schools around there, and usually you'll see like the same person catching quite a bit. My advice would be ask them, hey, what are you using? How are they biting? You know, what's your retrieve like? I mean, I'm not saying go have huge conversation with them where you're taking up their fishing time, but just ask. I mean, it doesn't hurt to ask. And most people, they'll be very kind and just be able to, and they will share with you. And just a little bit of advice could make a big difference in whether you're going to catch fish or not. So don't be afraid to ask. Don't crowd their spot. But obviously, if they're leaving, free game, right? So, and with that being said, if you have the next day available, come early the next day before anybody else gets there. That's just my recommendations to you guys. Once again, you could tell me if I'm wrong. You could teach me. I'm always willing to learn. So drop a comment with whatever you have for me, and I'm more than willing to read and learn for myself as well.